What's up, guys? Wow, yeah, Next decided to give a shout out to my channel in his new series. Yeah, so I was kind of surprised, um, you know, but I am appreciative. So I wanted to say thank you to Next and thank you to all the new people who decided to stop by. Like you said, my channel has a very simple format. I am not a pro YouTuber. I am a pro lifer or a pro real lifer. and I do not, do this for a living. So I don't really put a lot of quality into the format that I make my videos. So hopefully the guys that follow me, uh, you know, just know me for my wacky redstone ideas and creations. And I like to think that I contribute to some small degree to the overall Minecraft Bedrock Redstone community. But yeah, I think Nex and I both share the same philosophy with a lot of others that you know we have the ability now to store and to share ideas and creations. And overall, the more awareness that people have, the more that things get spread around, then the better off we're all going to be as a community, and the better advancements we can have. Just like in society, the more knowledge we have as a group, then the better off we are. And here in the Bedrock Redstone community, I'd like to think that there are a lot of people that are constantly trying to improve and make innovative new designs for things. And so I'm very grateful for his new series, and I do look forward to seeing who else he does decide to feature, and being able to learn from some other creators and to just get a better knowledge myself of how things operate and of what we can do. But anyway, so with all that being said, so I don't really have anything big to share with anybody right now. I am going to make a world download for this in case anybody wants to look at it. But this is kind of like the start or kind of some different ideas that I've been over to try to develop a neural network. So first of all, this does not work. But so a neural network, it's kind of a tough subject. So can you make a neural network in Minecraft? Yes, you can make a neural network. You can make a neural network out of normal logic gates just like this. But I know, so somebody's going to say, well, a neural network has to learn. No, a neural network doesn't really learn. So a neural network, let's see, I think I had Google open to some pictures in here. Okay, so a neural network is, if you don't know, I'll just give a brief summary. So a neural network is made with what's called perceptrons, which is what we think a good artificial neuron would be like or would behave like. So a perceptron is actually a very tough little, you know, they don't do all that much, but it's a very tough little circuit to make. Uh, so, so this is a perceptron here. So just, excuse me. So just think of this as being like a logic gate, and we have multiple inputs here, and each input is going to be controlled with a bias, which we call the weight. And the weight actually acts like a threshold to where if we were to think about this as far as like picture recognition or something like that, then think that each one of these inputs, these x1, x2, x3, an innumerable amount of inputs, just imagine that each pixel of an image is going to be connected to one of these, right? So for each neuron preceding the input layer, it's going to have a connection to every single neuron on the input layer. So just imagine if you're talking about like a giant picture that has 48,000 pixels or something, I don't know, whatever ridiculous amount. So you would need an input layer of the same number, And then you would need a wire going from each one of those to each neuron on the next layer. And so just imagine how complex this would be. So each one of these wires is going to have its own individual biasing value to control the effect that it has on the logic gate. And not to mention, each of the logic gates or each of the neurons is going to have its own biasing value to control the overall effect that all of these inputs combined will have on this neuron or this logic gate. So in the end, when you put everything together, you end up with something that looks like this, to where you have many, many inputs in the first hidden layer. This is a deep neural network, which a deep neural network simply means that you have many layers in between, right? So a typical neural network would simply be like this. So you either have an input and an output layer, or you have an input, a central hidden layer, and then you have an output layer. So that's a standard neural network. If we go back to a deep network, la 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 la, I don't know where that picture went, but this is good enough. So you can imagine that if you wanted to make something like some type of image recognition, then you would need a ton of logic gates. And if you were to try to design something that was actually adjustable, then imagine that every one of these wires would have to be individually adjusted. Every neuron that they're connected to would have to have its own bias. So this would be a really tough thing to try to recreate in Minecraft. But fortunately, we don't have to have a system that is quite this complicated. And the reason why is because we're not doing machine learning from the ground state. So what I mean is normally when you think of a neural network, you think of artificial intelligence, you think of, oh, it can determine a picture of a car that's off to the side of the road and know that it's a car. It's some type of really super high intelligence. Well, no, in general, something like this is just a big blob of cells that can't really do anything until it undergoes training. So the training is what we think of when we think of machine learning. So in machine learning, you give it an input and you say, I want this output to be this, and this one to be this, and this one to be this. And you go through hours to days to months of running a training program, which will refine all of those individual weights and biases until you get to a neural network that does exactly what you want it to do. So then you can scrap the whole machine learning process because you're done learning. Now you have a set of programmed cells that can each, carry out their specific task and do whatever they do, and you can just have a, go-to neural network. So it's no longer going to do any machine learning. So what I mean by making a neural network in Minecraft is that, so first of all, if you wanted to have, which I know a few people have done things like this before, but if you wanted to have a programmable logic gate, then that is what we have here. So it does have some benefits and it does have some shortfalls compared to the model of a perceptron that we just saw. But in general, this could be viewed similarly to a perceptron. So one of the downfalls is that this is only going to have two inputs. And if you wanted it to have more inputs, it's going to grow exponentially. And the reason why is because this is a simple binary decoder. So the way that we are using this as a programmable logic gate, we only have two inputs, but we are going to have four different outputs. So if you wanted to add more inputs, just say we wanted to have four, then we would need to have 16 different outputs. So just think in the terms of a neural network where you could have hundreds of input signals going into a single neuron, then you would need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or millions of outputs. each with their own T flip-flop or D flip-flop or some way to store a value. So yeah, this is a good, made from scratch model of a perceptron, but as far as on a larger scale to make a neural network, this is a terrible idea. You know, really, it's impossible. So after going through that, to give a brief overview of the world, since I'm going to make a world download. So this is the first thing that I came up with, which was actually stacking more memory onto an address so that we could actually have more outputs per input. So really, you can see that whenever we make a programmable logic gate, if you blow it up, then you actually produce what we know as memory. So even though we have little, lights that turn on and off down here to select our address, all we're doing is selecting a 4-bit address, which is 1 of 16. And that address is going to show us what we have saved, which in this case is that image. And then if I want to save something else, then I can just control the input here and trigger it to write, and there you go. So yeah, programmable logic gates would make a terrible idea for making a neural network, but they do show you the basic groundwork of making memory. So feel free to check these out. This is something that would be a little bit more complex for memory, but this is a giant memory cell that I made for the thing that shall not be named, which is the giant monstrosity way in the background. So the way that these operate, you can go through and play with this, but you can see if you look at the little scoreboard, you can see that we have a redstone value there. So this is a memory, analog memory cell. So we have a value of 5. If I want it to then have a value of 1, then I can just trigger that to rewrite, and it's going to store whatever new value I have put up here. So that's one way of making memory. So that is 12 bits per address. And in this case, that is 4 bits per address. So some of the other things that you can do with programmable logic gates. So this is a 2-bit input, and we have 2 layers of memory. So you can actually make a programmable item storage. So I just have it kind of, clumsily made out so you can see how it works, but basically just follow the instructions if you want to play with it. You select an item, select a location, click the program button, and then whenever you put that item into the sorter, it will go into that location, which is going to be one of these. So a terrible way to make an item sorter, but pretty interesting machine to play around with. These programmable logic gates, they're kind of somewhere in between, like memory and a Turing machine, because they can kind of, oh, well, maybe they can't compute, but they can kind of do things on their own. In this case, it can run, just by programming something like this. Then the machine can completely change where it sends items to. So I don't know. It's a very interesting idea. This is one set up to be used like an adder or subtractor of a single binary bit. So another use, a terrible idea to actually make it, especially since they have like 2 wide adders that are a handful of blocks to do the same thing. But this is one thing that you can do with it. So I have just, in general, some T flip-flops and D flip-flops that I made for all the stuff that I have here. T flip-flops pretty easy to make. You can kind of just throw them together. So feel free to play around with those. D flip-flop, of course, whenever your data line is on, it's going to write a 1. When your data line is off, it's going to write a 0. So a couple other things that I really just want to highlight from this world. So this is a new type of D flip-flop that I figured out. So we're actually using a piston to push a dropper to trigger the D flip-flop. And we can control with one input line whether we want it to write a 1 or a 0. So typical D flip-flop, you need a data line and then a clock. So you need two input lines. But in this case, we only need one input line. And the way that this works is that if we power this with a 4-tick signal, then it will always leave the item, which means that it will always produce a 1. But if we send it a signal with a 3-tick repeater, then it will never leave the item. So it will never, the dropper won't even fire. So it's a very compact way to make a D flip-flop, and you can see that you can arrange them in this honeycomb shape and actually be able to access them individually, both for writing and for taking the output. And that is what all these giant blocks of memory are made out of. So it's so compact, it's almost too compact because the only way that you can feed signals into the system is with repeater lines like this. Because you have to think that behind every block, so every one of these blocks is going to be a D flip-flop. So, it's kind of tough to actually get a signal in and out. But, so one really easy way to write to this memory is by using a multiplexer like this. So if we just send a signal through the 3-tick repeater, then it's going to write a 0. But if we send a signal through a 2-tick repeater and a 3-tick repeater at the same time, that will give us a 4-tick signal, which will allow it to write a 1. So feel free to play around with this. This is 128 bits of storage. So per each address, we have 4 bits of data. And likewise, the same thing over here. So we have a total of 256 bits here. So you can select an address with these 4 levers here, and we can see what value we have saved. So that's the only thing we have saved. And then to write, because these are D flip-flops, if I wanted to write data, let me just clear all that. So you can see that that is the one that is turned on right there. So if I want to erase that one, then I just simply write a 0. And if I want to write something else, then I can just write whatever over here, and it will write after a minute. There you go. Okay. So they do work. It takes a little time because it's such dense and compact storage that it's hard to actually get, the signal in there. So if anybody's into making computers and stuff, this is much better for like long-term storage. So I did make some circuits on top to try to reduce the lag because we're using pistons. So be sure to look at that if you're interested. And this is as much data that we can fit in this form factor. So this is 12 bits. We're using the full availability of the piston, the piston connections here to store 12 bits of data per address. So that is a total of 192 bits. So it's extremely dense memory, probably the most dense memory that you can actually make in Minecraft. So I just wanted to show that in case anybody was interested. Likewise, something that I don't think anybody has done, at least not in Bedrock, this is an up-down binary counter. And I think this is how we count up. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so we can have, so we have 1 here. So anytime you clock the input, it's going to count. So that's a 2. And then a 3. And to count down, the thing that makes this so special, first of all, is that it's only 2 wide on the output. Second of all, it is completely tileable. So if you wanted to go from 4 bits to 6 to 8 to whatever, then all you need to do is, add another slice and add another slice. Of course, you're going to be limited by the multiplexer up here, so you would have to come up with a different solution for that, which would just be, probably just putting pistons on the top. But anyway, so the thing that makes this unique is not only that it's only 2 wide on the output, but also that it can count both up and down, which I have seen, you know, very few people do in Minecraft in general over the past, decade that people have been posting YouTube videos. So all you do is you trigger the piston up here, and then you can count back down. So it was 3, now it's at 2, and now it's at 1. So I pretty much had to design this from scratch based off of a real world working binary counter. But one of the benefits to this design is that because we're using very basic T flip-flops here, all we need to do is turn these torches off for, a second, whatever, to allow the items to reset, and we can go back to 0 instantly. So if we reset that, then we just go back to 0, and then we can continue to count up or down, whatever. So very simple binary counter. And I think that is the majority of stuff that I had to share. One thing, one other thing that I did that this kind of works. So I realized that on this input here, that if we use my standard input circuit from the item categorizer, if you put a latch at the top, which is just the blue section here, then you can cause it to lock up after an item and hold the next items until, which I need to figure out a better way to do this. So one of the issues with this, well, I guess I should tell you the point of what this does. So the point of this is to be able to separate items by item type, first of all, but then to allow an item type to pass through, and then this will lock up until the machine is ready for the next item. So that's the point, but it kind of works and it kind of doesn't work. So sometimes it will allow multiple items to go through. So you saw that we just passed a single item, and now the next item is ready and waiting. But the problem with this is that the off circuit or the latching circuit has to be at the same timing as the clock here. Otherwise, it will allow multiple items to go through. So I'm trying to think of a way to make a solution, but that would probably be like, I don't know if this would be possible, but something like putting a comparator here to trigger a torch, and I don't know how we would make that. But the whole point would be to cause this hopper to lock up altogether. So if that gets powered there, then that will... I don't know exactly how we could do that. Yeah, so that won't work. So if you want to play around with this, if you want to tinker with it, I think the problem of it letting items go through is that this clock is running, and at an off cycle of the clock, we unlock it, which causes the items to go through at a different timing. So I think if there would be a way to actually power this, which I don't know how we could do that with the clock here. Maybe if we replace this with a comparator and then cut that off, then that would cause the hopper down there to stay locked. Yes. Okay, so if we had some type of an arrangement like this, maybe to where we put a comparator here with a torch, that would cause that to always be locked. Sorry, I'm going into experimental mode here. And why is that not touching? Because it's too high. So I would have to maybe put dust here, and then I have to make it bigger. So it could be figured out. But if we put that there like that, and then I'm going to need to put either a repeater or a comparator here. So yeah, something like this. Something like that. No, that wouldn't work either. Yeah. So if you cause it to lock up, then that should make it more reliable, and it should be able to separate items safely like that, I would think. So let's try it with one item of one type, and then more items of another type. So it should lock up and kind of store. No, now it locked up on the second one. Okay. No? Oh, it locked up on the first item. Well, that might work. I don't know. It'll somebody else. I'm sure somebody could figure it out if they really want a circuit like that. But anyway, so this is another way to use the circuit, the input circuit. So you can actually hook it up with a one-tick generator up here or a rising edge detector to power a piston. And you can use this as a shulker box splitter. So I don't think I have anything in there. Let's see how many boxes we have left. 3. So this I have done quite a bit, so I know that this one actually does work. But if we send in multiple item types, then of course it will separate by item type, and it will allow one item to go into a shulker, then it will break the shulker, and then allow the next item to go into the next. So you can see we have 3 torches there and 3 redstone there, and a lot of other things that I've already separated into shulkers. So a very small, fast way to make a shulker box splitter. Keep in mind though, one thing that I did realize when making this is that if you do put multiple items in here, then just say like if you have a bunch of cobblestone or stone or whatever separated and just kind of thrown all in a shulker box, you're going to, before you have to put it in the system, or before you put it in the system, you're going to have to make sure that they're at least lined up. Because the way that this functions is that it's going to pull out items by type, but because we only have one hopper beneath, if I put them in this arrangement, it's going to pull out the hoppers, then the torches, or it's going to pull out the dust, then the torches, then the dust. So if you want it to have all the dust in one chest, you're going to at least have to make sure that, in one shulker box, then you're going to at least have to make sure that they are lined up. Yeah. So feel free to look at that if anybody is interested. And I don't think I went over this, right? So, yeah. So this was a failed model of a of the beginning of a neural network. So, like I was talking about before, so one way that we can make a neural network is by completely just programming the first input layer by ourselves. And we can use very simple decoder lines like this to do that. And this will actually give us something that is a bit more complex than you might think. So yeah, this is not machine learning. So remember, the machine learning is really just an algorithm run on a computer to adjust all the weights and biases. But if we build a certain neural network to do something very specific, then it does not need to be trained or to try to learn anything on its own. We can simply program it by hand. So you may be surprised, but this very simple decoder, if you don't know how these are made, you simply, well, You can look it up. There are a lot of different resources because this thing is like 15 years old. But you would be surprised as to actually how many different logic gates are in this. So if I were to try to use individual two input I, logic gates like that to try to make this very small decoder that we have here, then I would probably need a few dozen of those to carry out the same basic functions that this does. So programmable logic gates for a neural network are not a great idea, at least in Minecraft, but something like this might be. So the point of this is to actually determine, so just say that we have 4 input pixels here, and the point of this is to determine what we have as far as lines in those pixels. So if we input any type of combination that will produce a line, so a diagonal. So we have 2 diagonals and we have 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines. So it should probably be a little bit more complex than this to make a neural network. But my idea in making at least the start of a neural network is that we use simple decoders like that that can determine what type of input circuits we have. So just say that if I make, or what type of input, you know, images we have. So just say that if I make a general 7 here, then we can actually break this down into lines. So you can see here that we will have a horizontal line, here a vertical line, and also here a vertical line. So that's some information that we can gather from inputting that, and we can have that break out into different things that tell us what's present. So if it's going to be a horizontal line or a vertical line, then we can have it show us where that is and what it is. And then further down the line, we can actually take these things and say, so if we have a horizontal line and it is next to a vertical line, like in this case, then we can use that, or we can use groups of these. So just say that we wanted to use a 4x4 area, so we could put together 4 different line values, and we can determine from that what shape they make. So in this case, if you were to make something like a circle, then we can take all that data and we can say that we have the 4 lines in this arrangement, and then we can go out to another decoder to say that that is going to be a circle. So then from there, you can actually have a training and learning circuit to program what the circle is supposed to represent, or to program what shapes or what lines make up what shapes. And yeah, so my goal is to actually create a very, very intelligent neural network, but I'm not there yet. So this was the start of a model, but yeah, so I built this up and it's a little too dumb. So I showed it to Gizmo and it took him like 2 minutes to realize that it can't distinguish between the number 3 and the number 8. So that's a problem. But yeah, so it's going to be, this is a start of what I hope to be a future project. But anyway, so that is just a couple of the things that I've been going over lately. And so to say, yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it. Did I mention it? So because I'm going to be offering this as a world download, this is Gizmo's Redstone test world that uses command blocks to tell you what value of redstone you are currently standing over. So it's very helpful in building projects. Likewise, it will tell you a note block value, and it does have a teleporting feature that allows you to go back and forth to projects. So let's see if this is, yeah, okay. So just to show finally, yeah, the giant monster I made over here. This is a 9-bit. This is a 9-bit address memory system that includes over 6,000 bits of memory. So this is what it took for me to realize that, yeah, just throwing a bunch of programmable logic gates together will not make a neural network. It will just make a giant block of memory. And it will take you a very long time to realize that. So anyway, yeah, feel free to look at it if you want to, but otherwise I'm just going to teleport out of the lag. If you want to check out Gizmo's individual or his original testing world, then I will have a link for the download in the description. Likewise, I'll have a link for this world download in the description if you want to check any of this stuff out. But yeah, that's just a little bit over what I've been going through the past couple of weeks. It's been a nightmare designing, giant blocks of memory and trying to figure all this stuff out and kind of lay the groundwork for a neural network. But we'll see where it goes, if it comes to fruition or not. But either way, I think it's going to be a lot of hard work. I can only imagine how much more complex I need to make this to be able to actually detect the lines correctly. So, yeah, it's going to be tough. But anyway, so that's going to be for a future video. But right now, yeah, I guess that's all. So thank y'all again for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.